Alright guys, today I am fitting a aftermarket steering wheel. New one from Motormech. Decent wheels for what you pay for them. They're proper racing guys, so they're not going to sell you cheap tat off eBay or out like that. So I think I paid about 60 quid for a wheel, which is quite decent. But first things first is to obviously get your original steering wheel off. Now my Corolla is a 2004 T-Sport. Obviously that should be sat in the middle there. I'm just going to show you how you get that off with it off, because it's easier to show you with it off than with it on and trying to get it off, if you know what I mean. So basically inside your steering wheel there's this little wire cage that runs all the way around and up here to there, and basically you access this via that little hole there in the bottom of your steering wheel. If I can get the angle of it, which is quite tricky, you can see the bottom of the wire cage in that hole, only just like, it's a bit of a crap angle, but basically what that does, my steering wheel straight again, is when you push that wire up, what it does, I can't get my finger in now to show you, is it pushes on this spring and it releases. So that wire frame sits on these, excuse me whilst I just hold it there, so these four lugs, so you've got 1, 2, 3 and 4, they actually, you can see the shape from the hook shape, they clip onto that wire. So what you've got to do is obviously disconnect your horn and your battery first, otherwise you'll be peeing your neighbours off by pressing your horn constantly. But you've got to push your horn in, push that wire cage up, and then as that cage is being held up, the horn assembly should just pull away, and you'll have a couple of wires to disconnect, and that's about it, as far as taking that part of your steering wheel away, if you get what I mean. It's hard to explain, but once you've done it, it's pretty self-explanatory really. The next step of taking your steering wheel off is this nut. It's a 19mm nut. Now for me the easiest way, I just stuck it on my impact driver, stuck it in reverse and off it comes. Dead easy. Once it's loose, which it is, I strongly advise that you leave your nut once it's off. Excuse me. Once your nut's off, I strongly advise you put it back on with just a few turns, just so that when you're pulling on your steering wheel to get it loose, when it does come loose, you don't pull the steering wheel off and whack yourself in the face with it. It has been done before, not by myself, but I've been told by others that it has. So yeah, leave that on. I found the easiest way was to give the steering wheel a good pull on the top. You can rock and rock and rock. Sometimes they've been on that many years that they're solid to get off. So I just pulled on it on the top, and I used a hammer very gently and just give it a good tap. And that initial shock was just enough to break the seal that the steering wheel came away. Some cars you might need a bit more yanking on it or whatever, but it will eventually come away. So once you've undone that, you've got your wheel off, it should come away. It's stuck on now. Says that, doesn't it? There we go, it's coming. There you go. As you can see, it wasn't even tight and I nearly hit myself in the face. So once that's off, you're just left with that, but underneath there is this unit. Now this slots in, I think it's that way up, so that's what your steering wheel should now look like. This bit here is part of your original, like your airbag. I think that's your horn. I don't know, I've not figured that bit out yet, but this bit turns with your steering wheel, which gives your constant contact from these plugs that go in the bottom of it here to these, to which you like your steering wheel controls. There's also another plug there which links to your stereo controls and everything for your radio and blah blah blah. So that bit you literally just pull it off, undo them plugs underneath there, and away it comes. You're not going to be needing this part, so I wouldn't recommend you throw it away, just in case you ever want to put your standard wheel back on for, say you get a dodgy MOTer that won't MOT your car because it's not got an airbag. Keep hold of it, because you never know, you might need to put all this back on to get it through an MOT. But for me, it's just going to go to one side out of the way for now. And that's as simple as that to get your wheel off. Stick your nut back on, keep it on there, because if you're bending down and you're trying to get down, the last thing you want to do is headbutt a splined end of your steering rack, because it does hurt. And that's that. Now the next step for me was trying to figure out how, wherever I put it now, the new steering boss, once it's on, how on earth you get your horn to work with it. Now this big brass disc here on the back is basically one large electrical contact. So what you need to do is you need to generate an electrical signal from this plate, from this plug, to that cut wire, which as you hold the plug in your hand that way, you can see the clips are on the bottom. It's this lower left hand socket which is your live for your horn. So I've not got my battery plugged in at the moment, but obviously it'd be that wire I'd be using, not this end. But if you got that wire there and contacted it to this metal surface here, it activates your horn and your horn sets off. So what I need to do, so I've drilled a hole there, you need to create a contact point from that to that hole, but without it being in contact with this metal face, because as soon as it touches that metal face, it sets your horn off. So basically what I've got is a pack of screws here, and I'll explain to you a little bit later on with regards to how to get all of those to work without it becoming an electrical contact to this. It's basically, it's an isolation point. I can't remember the name of the switch now, but it's basically like breaker points on an old motorbike, you know, for doing the contacts and stuff like that. And I also made a little piece of wire. It's probably 15 centimeters in length with a little ring end on it, dead easy to do, and that is going to be in contact with this wire and that wire. I'll solder them together later and I'll show you what it looks like as a finished product, and that is then going to have another form of contact to the back of this, so that's going to be in contact with that, and I'll show you that later on. So I'm going to do some soldering now, and then I'll move on to doing these things in the next video. Right, whenever I do any form of soldering, I always use, wherever I've just put the blooming tub, basically flux. So flux, it's on a brush. All it does, it helps with soldering contacts. Plumbers use it when they're plumbing, blah blah blah. It just basically helps your solder flow, and you get a better bond. So all I'm literally going to do, I can't see, so I'm looking through the camera, just a little blob on the end of each wire, and on the end of the new wire that you've got your eyelet on. Tricky to do this when you're only got one hand, because you always hold it phone. Basically just any old flux will do, as long as it's decent for copper. And then, excuse me, I'll be back in a moment. Quickest and easiest way I find of doing it is you get your solder and get it in focus. Bring your soldering iron up, just get a little bit of it on your soldering iron over to your wire that's got that bit of flux already on the end, and you see instantly it just tracks the solder up that wire, so that when you come to do it to the rest of your wires, it does the exact same thing. It's hard to get it in focus because it really wants to focus on my jeans, so you don't get them big blobs of solder that you see when somebody does a really crappy soldering job. It keeps it all nice and neat and keeps it all flush and clean. So I'm going to do the rest with these wires, and then I'll show you the next step. But always make sure that when you're using your heat shrink, you put it over your wire first before you do your soldering, because once you've soldered it, you can't put it on. So therefore you've got to unsolder it in order to put your heat shrink on, if you get what I mean. Right, check out. Right, so that's the three wires soldered together. So basically this one, you've just cut it in half, tin the ends, and then this one, if you add it in facing to the back of the car, it's because it's going to slot up through the back of your steering wheel here. So if you aim it in the direction that you want it to go to start with, it makes things a lot easier. And if you put your heat shrink over this lower wire first, it'll go over and it'll cover both, as opposed to if you put it on there like I did and I had to unsolder it and resolder it again, it'll only come down to that point. You can't put it over everything. So I cocked up, but I've fixed it, so it's back on there now. Once it's over there, heat shrink it on and your cables are re-protected, so they're not just going to earth to anything and just set your horn randomly off whilst you're driving. So yeah, that's how I did it. So if you want to do it that way, feel free, but if you think of another way, do it however you feel easiest for yourself. Right, once you've got that heat shrunk, the next thing you want to do is you're going to want to put your eyelet end up through the back of your steering wheel until it gets to this hole here, basically, that I've drilled. That's a 6mm hole, by the way. I'll explain that in a minute as to why I've done it to that size, but you'll soon see. But if you look down the side of your steering column there, there's basically, where are we? Bit of a gap down there. So if you just bring your wire up through that gap, it's a nice clean path to do so. And also, if you feel as though your indicators and stuff are getting in your way and you want to move them out of the way for this bit, you can do. It's very simple. I just use a pair of pliers, and in that bit there, if you just push that tab in, you can actually just pull your indicators down and out of the way, so they're absolutely no inconvenience to you whatsoever. Same with that side, it's just that little tab, push that in, that one comes away. But they're not too bad, but it just makes things a bit easier. I've got nice and skinny fingers. If you've got fat fingers, it makes it a lot easier. Right, and then, so this wire, basically, if you keep that in the position where it's going to stay, bring that up through that space, and basically it's just going to go like that, but it won't hold there at the moment when that your indicator's sort of not in the way. But for now, you can just slot it through there to hold it in place. And for me, that's all I need to do, so I'm just going to clip these back on. So in order to get back on, you just slide it back on, click it into place, job done. So this wire is now fed up to roughly where you need it to be. Now the next bit is where it gets a little bit more fiddly, because you've got all these little bits to deal with, but it's not too bad. If you're generally good with spanners and that, you'll piss it. But basically what I've got there is, see that big washer in the middle? See how it's got like a bit in the middle of it? I don't know how to, but it's like a top hat, if you know what I mean. That's a special washer that I've made myself. You can buy these, and I've found a place that does do them. So basically it's a little nylon washer with an extra collar on it. Now that collar goes in that hole, sits like that, so that when you put the fastener through, it doesn't come in contact in any way whatsoever with the actual bolt part of the fastener. Now the nut and washer that go on the other side will come into contact with this, but that's where this next nylon washer comes into play, because you put that on the back of the washer and it stops that coming into contact with the back side of this. So you're completely isolating the bolt from this, so it doesn't touch this in any way whatsoever. I'll do a drawing and I'll try and add it onto the end of the video so you can see exactly how to put the fastener through this, and with all this gubbins on it, if you know what I mean, so that it's a bit clear. It's hard to explain, but you'll see what I mean. Anyway, I'll show you how it's gone together once I've done it. So for wiring your eyelet so it doesn't come in contact with this, the way I've done it, I've got an M4 fastener. It is a 15mm long, I think it is. Might be 20, I can't remember. I'll measure up and I'll tell you later. So basically you've got the normal fastener and a normal washer which goes through your eyelet, and then on the other side of the eyelet is where you're going to install that nylon washer. So when you tighten it up, this eyelet doesn't touch that. It's earthing, well, not earthing, it's just isolating it from touching that plate, if you know what I mean. It'll become clear. I'll take a picture of it later so you can see what I mean. Right, what I didn't explain before was what I've put on here. Basically this is a copper pipe clamp. You pick them up from any hardware store. They're just a basic copper clamp like so. I've cut the end off of it here. This is a 22mm version. So basically the wire that you've got that goes from where I soldered it runs up the back of this unit to that eyelet, which is isolated from this so it doesn't earth to this, travels through that bolt to the nut, and then that nut picks up the electrical contact which transfers it to this. Now this is sprung loaded, as you can see. It's got a bit of a spring to it, so that when you put your new hub assembly on, I'm not putting it on properly yet, just to show you, when you tighten that down, that actually comes into contact with the back of the hub, so as you turn your hub, this is always in contact with this. So basically what happens then is when you attach these to the horn, which is here, so you've got your horn, you attach it to those, as you push the horn button, the power is delivered from that wire through all your hub and everything, through the switch unit, and then it's earthed, and the earth actually goes back through your steering column and sounds your horn. So that's basically how I have gone about wiring in my horn, so that it still passes MOT for having a horn, but it might not pass MOT for removal of your airbag. But if need be, all you've done is soldered a joint. There's nothing else. That when you come to put your original steering wheel back on, you can just take that off, re-plug all these back into your original steering, and it will all work as it should, as it was normally. You might just have to take these off for that, the yellow, for this thing to go back on, but it's not the end of the world. It's a few screws, and that's it basically. So I shall wire my battery back in and show you it working, hopefully. Right, car battery's linked back up. I'm not throwing the steering wheel on because I still want to figure out what to do with these plugs for the airbag lights. None on at the moment because the engine's not running, the key's not in. But horns on, quick blast because my little lad's in bed. Don't want to wake him up, he's having his midday nap. And there you go, she's working. Nice easy job. Long-winded but nice and easy.